Here's something most people never hear. You don't have to strip carbs out of your life to get your blood sugar under control. The quickest wins usually come from adding the right foods, not cutting out entire food groups. I've watched this play out with patient after patient. Real people who turned their numbers around in a matter of days just by folding a handful of foods into meals they were already eating. And it wasn't a short-lived fix. Many of them have kept their sugars steady for months, even years, without needing medication to do the heavy lifting. In this video, I'm walking you through 10 foods that work with your body's own chemistry to ease insulin resistance from the inside, so your blood sugar comes down naturally and stays down. What makes this approach different is timing. Most advice you hear focuses on subtraction. Cut the bread, cut the pasta, cut the fruit. That approach can work for a while, but it's hard to sustain, and it doesn't address why your body is struggling to handle glucose in the first place. Addition works differently. Every food on this list is doing active biochemical work at the level of digestion, inflammation, or the insulin receptor itself. Stack enough of them into your week, and your body starts handling carbohydrates the way it's designed to instead of fighting them. Before we start, if you want more of these deep dive explainers instead of quick fixes, subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what your fasting number looked like this morning. I read every one, and they genuinely shape what I cover next. Now, let's get into it. Here's what rarely gets explained in a rushed appointment. High blood sugar almost always begins with a hormone called insulin. Insulin's job is to unlock your cells so glucose, the sugar in your bloodstream, can move out of the blood and into the cell where it's actually used. But after years of blood sugar swings, your cells stop responding. Insulin knocks and the door stays shut. That's insulin resistance. Your pancreas compensates by pumping out more insulin. Your blood sugar climbs anyway. And often the response is another medication that adds still more insulin to a system already overloaded with it. None of this happens overnight. Insulin resistance usually builds slowly, over years of high sugar meals, disrupted sleep, and chronic stress, all of which raise inflammation and make cells less receptive to insulin's signal. That's actually good news, because it means the process can move in the other direction too. The same slow, cumulative process that got your cells to stop listening can teach them to start listening again, just through different daily choices instead of the ones that got you here. I'm Dr. William Lang, and every food on this list does one of three things. It slows down how fast sugar enters your bloodstream, it calms the inflammation that makes your cells unresponsive to insulin, or it helps wake the insulin receptor back up so your body can do what it's built to do. You don't need to start all 10 at once. Layer them in over the next couple of weeks, and pay attention to how your fasting numbers respond as you go. Small, hard, amber-colored seeds you'll find in the spice aisle for a couple of dollars. Don't skip this one just because it sounds unfamiliar. It's one of the more effective tools on this list. Fenugreek is rich in a soluble fiber called galactomannan. Once it hits liquid in your stomach, it swells into a thick gel that physically slows how quickly carbohydrates move into your small intestine. Slower movement means sugar trickles into your blood instead of flooding it. No spike, no scramble to produce insulin. Fenugreek also contains an amino acid that helps your pancreas release insulin more efficiently and helps muscle cells absorb glucose. I've seen fasting numbers shift within a week or two from this alone. How to use it. Soak a teaspoon of whole seeds in a glass of water overnight. In the morning, drink the water and eat the softened seeds before breakfast. If the bitterness is too much, grind them and stir half a teaspoon into yogurt or over eggs. Start small. This fiber is potent, and your gut needs a few days to adjust. Some people prefer capsule extracts for convenience, but the whole seed gives you the gel-forming fiber intact, which is where most of the benefit comes from. You likely already have cinnamon in your cupboard, but the type matters, and most people reach for the wrong one. Standard grocery store cinnamon is cassia, which contains a compound called coumarin that isn't ideal in large daily doses. Ceylon cinnamon, sometimes labeled true cinnamon, is gentler and safer for everyday use. It's rich in polyphenols, plant compounds that act somewhat like insulin. They help receptors bind glucose more effectively and slow stomach emptying after meals. Research from a USDA nutrition program found that less than half a teaspoon daily meaningfully lowered fasting glucose in adults with type 2 diabetes. How to use it? Stir a quarter to half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon into oatmeal, coffee, or a smoothie. Ideally alongside a carbohydrate-heavy meal, since that's when you want those receptors working hardest. Look for it labeled specifically as Ceylon or True Cinnamon on the jar. Most bulk spice aisle cinnamon, unless stated otherwise, is cassia by default. Not full-grown broccoli, the tiny 3-day-old sprouts. That distinction matters more than almost anything else on this list. Broccoli sprouts are packed with a compound called sulforaphane at levels 50 to 100 times higher than mature broccoli. Sulforaphane acts on the liver, quieting the excess glucose production that happens overnight, which is why so many people wake up with a fasting number that seems to come from nowhere, despite not eating all night. A 2017 study out of Lund University in Sweden gave concentrated sulforaphane to people with type 2 diabetes and saw fasting blood sugar drop measurably, with the biggest improvement in those whose numbers were hardest to manage. How to use it? Grow them at home in a jar for almost nothing, or buy them at the store. A small handful, about a quarter cup, on a salad or sandwich most days is plenty. Eat them raw or barely wilted. High heat destroys the active compound. Most people write avocado off as a fat to avoid, and that avoidance costs them. The fat in avocado is monounsaturated, the same family found in olive oil, and it's one of the more blood sugar-friendly foods available. Adding avocado to a meal doesn't remove the carbohydrate. It slows how quickly that carbohydrate turns into blood sugar, so glucose rises gradually instead of spiking. Monounsaturated fat has also been linked to improved insulin sensitivity. It's often the easiest habit to build because it makes meals more filling and cuts down on snacking later. How to use it? Half an avocado a day is a reasonable target. On eggs, mashed onto whole grain toast, or added to a salad that already includes a starch. Tiny gray and black seeds that punch well above their size. If you've ever watched chia turn into pudding in liquid, you've already seen how it behaves in your gut. Chia is one of the richest sources of soluble fiber available. In your stomach, it forms the same kind of gel as fenugreek, wrapping around carbohydrates and slowing their absorption to a crawl. Steady release instead of a spike and crash. It also carries a plant-based omega-3 fat that helps calm the low-grade inflammation underlying insulin resistance. How to use it? 1 to 2 tablespoons daily, stirred into yogurt, mixed into water with a splash of lemon, or blended into a smoothie. Give it 10 minutes to gel, and drink plenty of water alongside it. This one doesn't work by slowing digestion. It addresses the deeper issue, why your cells stopped responding to insulin in the first place. Chronic low-grade inflammation interferes directly with the insulin signal at the cell surface. Salmon and mackerel are rich in 2 omega-3 fats, EPA and DHA, among the most effective natural anti-inflammatories known. They calm those inflammatory signals, support a healthier cell membrane, and help the insulin receptor function properly again. Patients who eat fatty fish twice a week tend to show steadier numbers, and often better blood pressure too. How to use it? Aim for 2 servings a week, about palm-sized. Wild salmon, mackerel, sardines, and herring all work, baked, grilled, or canned if that's easier on the budget. Canned mackerel and sardines are some of the most affordable options here. Of all the nuts, this is the one worth prioritizing for what it does for blood vessels and insulin at once. Walnuts are rich in polyunsaturated fat and the same plant-based omega-3 found in chia. That fat supports the endothelium, the lining inside blood vessels, one of the first things affected by high blood sugar. At the same time, the combination of fat, fiber, and protein in walnuts blunts the post-meal blood sugar rise and has been linked to lower fasting insulin, a marker of how hard the pancreas is working. A small handful, about a quarter cup, or 7 to 10 whole walnuts, as a snack in place of crackers or a cookie. Keep them raw or dry roasted, not candied, and use them to replace a processed snack rather than stack on top of one. If you're not a fan of eating them plain, crushed walnuts stirred into plain yogurt or sprinkled over a salad work just as well. The benefit comes from consistency, not the format. Yolk included. For years, the yolk got an unfair reputation, which pushed people toward sugary cereals that did far more damage to their blood sugar. A whole egg is almost entirely protein and fat, with virtually no carbohydrate, so on its own it barely moves blood sugar at all. But the real benefit is what's sometimes called the second meal effect. Starting the day with eggs instead of toast or cereal steadies blood sugar not just at breakfast, but through lunch as well. The protein and fat also keep you full, easing the mid-morning cravings that lead towards something sweet. 2 to 3 whole eggs in the morning is a solid target, scrambled, boiled ahead for the week, or folded with spinach. Add that avocado from earlier, and you've built a strong blood sugar-friendly breakfast. If mornings are rushed, hard boil a batch on Sunday so breakfast takes 10 seconds instead of 10 minutes. The goal is removing every excuse to reach for cereal on a busy day. Of everything on this list, this one shows the fastest visible effect if you're tracking with a glucose meter at home. The active ingredient is acetic acid, which does 2 things. It slows stomach emptying, so carbohydrates enter the bloodstream more gradually, and it helps muscles pull glucose from the blood to use as fuel. Research led by Dr. Carol Johnston at Arizona State University found that a tablespoon of vinegar before a carbohydrate-heavy meal reduced the after-meal blood sugar spike by roughly 20% in people with insulin resistance. 1 tablespoon diluted in a full glass of water, 10 to 15 minutes before a carb-heavy meal. Always dilute it. Undiluted vinegar is hard on tooth enamel and the throat. If you're on blood sugar medication, check with your doctor first, since combining the two can lower your sugar faster than expected. This one makes the whole point of the video. Lentils are a carbohydrate, and they still help lower blood sugar. Lentils are built around a slow-digesting resistant starch, wrapped in soluble fiber and plant protein. That combination releases glucose into the blood gradually over hours rather than all at once, and lentils carry their own second meal effect, keeping sugar steadier well after the meal. Swapping white rice or potatoes for lentils a few times a week is one of the more reliable ways to bring down an A1C, your 3-month blood sugar average. Half a cup to a cup of cooked lentils a few times a week in soup, stew, or a cold salad with olive oil and a splash of that vinegar. Canned, pre-cooked lentils work just as well as dried ones if you're short on time. Rinse them well, and they're ready in minutes. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Renata, 63, recently retired, who came to me anxious because her fasting sugar was sitting around 180 and her doctor had just recommended adding a second medication. She didn't want to keep climbing that ladder. She'd watched her own mother lose her sight to the same disease, and the fear was real. We didn't eliminate her carbohydrates. We added eggs and avocado in place of cereal, a tablespoon of vinegar before her bigger meals, lentils swapped in for white rice, walnuts instead of an afternoon cookie, fatty fish twice a week, cinnamon in her coffee, and broccoli sprouts on her lunchtime sandwich. Within the first week, her fasting number started to drop. Within 3 months, working closely with her own physician, she'd come off that second medication entirely, and her A1C moved out of the diabetic range. 2 years later, it's held. She didn't go hungry. She ate more, just the right things, and her body did the rest. What stuck with her most, she told me later, wasn't the numbers on the meter. It was realizing she had far more control over this than she'd been led to believe. Each of these foods hands insulin its job back without deprivation. The fiber-rich foods slow glucose absorption so the pancreas doesn't panic. The fish, walnuts and chia calm the inflammation that was jamming the signal. The cinnamon and vinegar work directly at the insulin receptor, helping it respond again. Do that consistently, and the cell that stopped answering the door gradually starts opening it. That's what easing insulin resistance looks like at the cellular level. And once it takes hold, the body tends to hold the improvement on its own. If you're on insulin or an older class of blood sugar medication called a sulfonylurea, these foods can lower your sugar quickly enough that your current dose becomes too strong, which can push you into a low. Add these changes with your doctor monitoring your numbers and let them adjust your medication as your body improves. Don't stop any prescription on your own. Bring this list to your next appointment instead. 1. Tomorrow morning, swap cereal or toast for 2 to 3 whole eggs and half an avocado. 2. Tonight, soak a teaspoon of fenugreek seeds in water and drink it first thing in the morning. 3. Pick up Ceylon cinnamon, not cassia, and start with a 1/4 teaspoon a day in coffee or oatmeal. 4. Before your biggest carb-heavy meal tomorrow, take a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar diluted in a full glass of water, 15 minutes ahead. 5. This week, swap white rice or potatoes for lentils at least twice, and put fatty fish on the menu 2 nights. Layer these in over the next couple of weeks. You're not giving up the foods you love. You're adding the ones that protect you. No. Pick 2 or 3 that fit naturally into meals you already eat, and add the rest over the following weeks. Consistency with a few matters more than perfection with all 10. Some people notice a shift in fasting numbers within days, particularly with the vinegar and fenugreek. Others take a few weeks, especially if inflammation has been building for years. Track your numbers rather than comparing your timeline to anyone else's. Can I do this if I don't have a glucose meter at home? Yes. These foods support overall metabolic health regardless of whether you're tracking numbers daily. That said, a basic meter makes it easier to see which changes are moving the needle for you specifically, since everyone responds a little differently. What if my numbers don't move at all? Insulin resistance can have layers. Sleep quality, stress, activity levels, and other medications all play a role alongside diet. If you've made these changes consistently for several weeks without any shift, that's worth bringing to your doctor as part of a broader conversation, not a reason to assume the approach failed. Everything we covered today helps during the day and after meals, but many of you have mentioned something else. Your highest reading of the day shows up first thing in the morning, before you've eaten anything at all. There's a specific reason your liver does that overnight and a way to address it. I've made a video that walks through exactly what's happening while you sleep and how to wake up to a better number. I'll link it right here. Go watch that one next, and I'll see you there. Dr. William Lang, Senior Medical Insight.